if this doesn't work out, at least the Bears went for the jugular. At least the Bears went for someone who they believe can fix the franchise, can turn it around, and it's up to the Bears to figure out how they are going to set up Ben Johnson for success. What's up, everybody? It's Bando's Breakdowns. We are officially back. It is finally the new year. Very, very, very excited to be back for a new calendar year in the world of sports. Thank you so much for your patience. It is greatly appreciated. We should have done this episode a couple of weeks ago. Had some scheduling changes, had some network reshuffling, just with some new stuff that we're going to be doing in 2025. But we are finally back. We are here, and it's very, very exciting. So before we get into everything that is going to be this show, it's actually going to be a very brief show. There's not a ton to talk about, but there is some pressing news items to discuss. Just wanted to quickly remind you all before we get into anything to please be sure to like and subscribe to the Bench Podcast Network wherever you can. That's youtube.com/ETB Network. It's greatly appreciated. We just surpassed 900 subscribers, so if you could hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, if you will, and just make sure to keep following along, keep supporting the show, and keep doing everything that you guys are doing to just support the whole network at large. But if you just like this show, please be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcast. That's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, so much more. Some more new stuff on the way. That could be developing here in the future. I'm not going to get into that right now, but just know that there's some stuff coming. There's going to be more mediums along the way, and please be sure to always remember that Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback. Playback has been a wonderful sponsor to us. We were able to watch the national championship game the other night between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State winning its first national championship in a decade. We'll get into all that and so much more. Back-to-back national titles for the Big Ten, first time in 82 years that's ever happened. So please be sure to stay on the lookout for all that stuff. Again, that's playback.tv/EDB Network. And speaking of Playback, here we go. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together, and again, as I alluded to, please be sure to join our community, playback.tv/EDB Network, to find out more. All right, now we can finally get into, I guess, the meat and potatoes of what this show is going to be about. And one last reminder, too, to please be sure to follow my show accounts across social media at Bando's Breakdown. Now that the TikTok ban, I guess, has been lifted, at least temporarily, from what it seems like. You'll be able to see more of my content on TikTok. That's where I'm getting most of my reach, as well as Instagram. So please be sure to just stay tuned there. I'm also on Twitter, but that gets less love as of late. We're going to try to improve that as we get into 2025 and so much more. But very much looking forward to what we have in store just overall this year and everything else. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with Zain's overview here. Have a bunch of stuff on the docket to get to, so I guess let's get right into it. Ohio State wins the national championship. The college football season is officially over. Ohio State wins it over Notre Dame, 34-23. As we all know, Ohio State was one of the teams that did not get a coveted bye. They had to play a first-round home game against Tennessee, which they won. They dominated Tennessee there. Then, of course, they went on to the Rose Bowl, knocked off Oregon, which was a huge upset. Oregon, of course, was the Big Ten champion during the regular season and, of course, won the conference title by knocking off Penn State. So Ohio State beat them. They were a perennial favorite to win the national championship going into this whole thing. Then, of course, Ohio State knocks off Texas. And then finally, to cap off the Ryan Day so called revenge tour, if you want to call it that, that's one of the things I dubbed it. There's been a bunch of other people in the college football community that have dubbed it some other things as well. But just know that from my perspective, I considered it a revenge tour, and I just thought overall it was a great game, a great year for Ohio State, a very tumultuous year for Ohio State. Ryan Day losing 4 straight years in a row to Michigan, but it's finally validated with a national championship win. Of course, going into this year or going into this coming fall, which would be year 5 of this Michigan losing streak. Um, excuse me, Ryan Day is going to be under immense pressure. He's 70-10 overall as Ohio State's head coach. As I just alluded to, losing 4 times to Michigan, and there's going to be a lot of pressure for this Ohio State team. Well, I think they're losing some key pieces, but they're also bringing a bunch of key pieces back, and one of those is Jeremiah Smith. He had the huge catch late in the game to basically end any hope of Notre Dame coming back to win. So that was very exciting as well. And just overall, a great year for Ohio State, a year that Ohio State needed. Ohio State needed to win a national title at some point. Of course, it's only fitting that 10 years after the first expanded playoff occurred with 4 teams, it expands to 12 teams, and Ohio State wins the first iteration of that. So congratulations to Ohio State, Ryan Day, and just that whole team. They were phenomenal to watch all year, and they beat a great Notre Dame team led by Marcus Freeman. Only bright things ahead for Notre Dame. Yeah, they're not in the conference. Obviously, we can go into that debate all day, but to only lose 2 games all year and to have one of them be to the national champions and another one be to a team that they probably shouldn't have lost to, I think there's not much to hang your hat about except that Notre Dame has finally arrived once again on the college football landscape and should be respected as such. So I loved this story from Ohio State. I'm not an Ohio State fan. Those of you who have watched the show and listened to the show since last April know where my allegiances sit. We're going to get into the final AP poll in just a few minutes. But what I will say, though, is Ohio State deserves to be respected. They are national champions. Again, as I alluded to, back-to-back Big Ten champions, winning a national title for the first time in 82 years. That says a lot. The Big Ten has arrived. The SEC, is still sitting in the corner, thinking about what could have been. But still, man, this is college football. Parity needs to occur, and this is the parity that college football needed to feel like it's going into a period where it can be sustainable. It's not oversaturated, and you need different teams to win every year. This is what's great about college football. If you get the SEC winning every year, there's no point. Now you got the Big Ten mixed in. It adds a ton more flair. It adds even bigger games, bigger possibilities, bigger potential TV rights down the road, bigger everything. I mean, I think overall it's a positive thing. And speaking of the Big Ten dominated the final AP poll. Top 25 AP poll came out Tuesday morning, had some nice cushion to it, if you will. We've got number 1 Ohio State, number 3 Oregon, number 5 Penn State, number 10 Indiana, and of course my alma mater, even though I do think they're ranked a little bit too low, number 16 Illinois, coming in with a 10-3 record, capping off its season with a Citrus Bowl win against South Carolina, capping off probably the best Illinois season since 2007. So overall, really awesome to see all these teams in there. Of course, Indiana is the one that was the huge surprise after what it did under Tom Allen. Not a very successful program that Kurt Cinetti inherited, but hey, to get Indiana to where they are now, to get them nationally relevant, given who they had, given the resources that they had, was unbelievable. They really did change the sport of college football in the sense that you don't need to be one of these blue blood programs to be successful. And you could say the same thing about Illinois. And I've talked about Illinois a ton on this podcast. I'll keep talking about Illinois for as long as I host this show. Um, I think Brett Bielema, and I'm just going to be honest, I think he's one of the best coaches in college football. I think he's proved it. I think going 5-7 in 2023 put a lot of people, on a with an uneasy feeling that maybe this was too good to be true. Maybe this was a retread hire from Illinois' past. Just considering that he struggled at the end of his time at Arkansas, but what he's been able to do, what he's been able to build, the amount of guys he sent to the NFL. I mean, look at what just happened this past weekend in the divisional playoffs. Commanders and the Lions, tons of guys that he coached were on both teams, and Quan Martin may have made the biggest play of the game to send the Commanders to the NFC Championship. That was not a Brett Bielema recruit, so to speak, but he was somebody who was nurtured. And when Brett came in for Quan's final 2 years, Quan Martin became a better football player because of Brett Bielema. So, I mean, that just goes to show you how far Brett Bielema has come in his time in Illinois, and he's only been there 4 years. He's entering year 5, and this is arguably the most anticipated Illinois season going into this year of my lifetime, man. I mean, I haven't seen so many people be this excited for a singular football season from my alma mater since I started following the program in 2018. You have to understand, when I was in school, this team was terrible. In 2018, they were 4-8 under Lovie Smith. I remember sitting in the stands as an 18-year-old freshman watching Illinois get obliterated by Miles Sanders in Penn State, where Penn State scored over 60 points. I'll never forget it. I remember when Illinois got trounced on homecoming that same year against Purdue. I remember sitting in the car and listening to Illinois' 63 to nothing loss to Iowa, and then seeing Lovie Smith get a contract extension. I remember all that. I remember the Red Box Bowl defeat against Cal. That's a game Illinois should have won. And of course, I also remember, the COVID year where Illinois was 2-6 and Lovie got fired before the year ended. So when Brett came in, my senior year of undergrad, I didn't really know what to think, but all I knew was that he had success at Wisconsin. He did all right at Arkansas, and maybe, just maybe, if he found the right pieces, they would have a chance to be pretty good. And ever since he's been there, they've essentially been nothing but good. Outside of Brandon Peters, he's only had good quarterbacks. If you think about that, he's only had solid quarterbacks. He had Tommy DeVito for a season, and of course he brings in Luke Altmaier, who's now entering his third year at Illinois. It's his final year of college football, and look at what Luke Altmaier has been able to do. He's quickly become one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. He's right up there, you know, alongside alongside guys like Drew Aller, who's essentially coming back to Penn State. As long as something doesn't change, and they have a ton of talent. I mean, they've already they've graduated some talent. They got some guys out of the transfer portal. They've got Hudson Clement. They've added some pieces to the offensive line. I mean, they're doing what they need to do to be a sustainable program in the Big Ten. Be in that top 4, be in that top 5 conference discussion, and are winning the games they're supposed to win. And now they're going to have the biggest test of them all when in early October, the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes come to Champaign for arguably, and I said this last year going into the Michigan game, which Illinois won. Uh, I thought that was the biggest game of Brett Bielema's tenure. If he can knock off Ohio State and have a signature win, just like he did at Wisconsin, when Wisconsin was a top ranked team, or they weren't number one, but they were a top ranked team, and they beat a very good Ohio State team. This was 15 or so years ago that this occurred. You could be looking at Illinois as a national contender, as one of these 2-loss college football playoff fringe teams. I wouldn't put it past them. I think Oregon's always going to be there as long as Dan Lanning stays consistent. And of course, James Franklin, despite all the criticism he gets for not winning the big games in the playoffs, he has a hell of a program. And you got to give it to Kurt Zanetti. Until Indiana starts to falter, I mean, you have to look at this team and say, yeah, they're probably going to be pretty good. Pretty good. So overall, with this final number, you've got 5 Big 10 teams in the top 25, as I alluded to. That's pretty remarkable. Um, I don't really disagree with these placements, except I don't know. I think you could have. I don't know. I mean, I think Oregon being ranked ahead of Penn State makes sense because Oregon beat Penn State in the conference championship game, and then of course Indiana has to be ranked ahead of Illinois simply because Indiana made the college football playoff and Illinois didn't. So I would say this is justified. I just don't know about number 16. I think when you look at the teams above Illinois, I mean, just my personal opinion, this is the wrong ballot. I want to go to the main one. I was looking at a writer that I pay attention to, who actually at Illinois, where I would have ranked him if I had an AP vote. Full disclosure for those who don't know, I don't have an AP vote, but if I ever do, I will be sure to let you guys know in the future. Like, okay, they were ranked, below the likes of Iowa State, which I don't know, you could justify that. Clemson, I don't know. I don't know. Like some of these are question marks. Like I personally think Illinois is better than BYU. I also think that you can make the argument that Illinois might be better than SMU. Obviously, SMU is going through its own changes, and then Ole Miss, you can't really justify that. But for Illinois to be ahead of Alabama in football at this juncture in time in this whole NIL era is pretty remarkable, and it's clear that Illinois is going where it wants to go. So enough of college football for now. We're going to get into more college football as the offseason rolls on. We've got another edition of Forever Power 5 coming up here. I think it'll drop tomorrow from the time that this is coming out. So be sure to tune into that. But for now, we're going to get into some NFL news because the Bears might be back. The Bears hired Ben Johnson as their new head coach. Of course, he was previously the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions for 2 seasons, was a part of the Lions staff in various capacities for 4 of those seasons. And simply put, the Bears have their guy. He's an offensive innovator. I've seen this guy get compared to the likes of Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay. It's clear Caleb Williams needs an offensive coach. I think they got their guy to do it. And somebody even alluded to it the other day. If this doesn't work out, at least the Bears went for the jugular. At least the Bears went for someone who they believe can fix the franchise, can turn it around, and it's up to the Bears to figure out how they are going to set up Ben Johnson for success. This is an unbelievable move by the Bears to get him. He's still in the NFC North. He obviously knows the division well. Was with the Lions for a long time. Knows how to develop. Knows how to make quarterbacks better. Knows how to continue to develop them. Having worked under Jared Goff for as long as he has, I mean that's pretty remarkable. And Caleb Williams, his ceiling hasn't even been reached yet. We have no idea who this kid could become, how he'll be remembered in Chicago. He showed flashes of brilliance last year. It didn't translate into very many victories, but he kept the Bears in a lot of games, and I'm excited to see where Ben Johnson takes the next step because if he can do that, the Bears are a few pieces away, in my opinion, from being a consistent playoff team. And I've been seeing all these rumblings now. Oh, because the Bears have an offensive-minded coach, do you potentially take Ashton Genty, with the 10th overall pick? And to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't hate it. I think Ashton Genty was one of the most exciting players in all of college football. I think if you put him in an offense that can, run in space and can, have various, various packages to not just move the ball, but move it in such a way where, okay, maybe you're putting, maybe you're putting a running back in as a wide receiver type. I think Ashton Genty could fit that mold. I think you could have multiple two-headed monster formations where, Caleb Williams and, acts as almost as a decoy running back, if you will, and try to do it that way. So I think the Bears have a lot of options. They're looking for the best fit for their defensive coordinator position at the moment. But overall, though, Very, very exciting week to be a Chicago Bears fan. And also the Bulls just won the other night too. So 2025 for Chicago sports could be looking on the up and up as we get closer and closer to baseball in April. But overall, very exciting hire for the Bears. I'm excited to see what they do with it, starting with the NFL draft this April, and it'll be very interesting to see. So, looking forward to see what the Bears can do moving forward. All right, let's get into the first UFC pay per view event of the year. We had UFC 311 this past weekend. Islam Makhachev defeats Renato Moicano by darts choke in the first round. Very, very impressive win for the pound for pound best fighter in the world. Overall, not much really else to say here other than Makachev deserves it. I mean, he deserves all the praise he gets. Again, he's one of the best fighters to ever do it. Dana White has already claimed him as the best lightweight ever. It's hard to make an argument now that he's surpassed Khabib Nurmagomedov in title defenses. But one thing I do want to make clear, though, and this is something that I feel is justified, when we look back on Islam Makhachev's career, the question I'd like to leave you guys with is this: is fighting two fighters who essentially had no business being in there with him. And I'm talking about the Alexander Volkanovski rematch in October of 2023. And I'm also talking about this past weekend's fight against Renato Moicano. Are we going to hold it against Makachev that he beat those guys in the way that he did, when technically he shouldn't have fought either guy when they fought? It was because of circumstantial matters that they occurred. Just something to think about, because I think even though he's now defended his title 4 times, he's only really beat, if you really think about it, two natural lightweights in that span. He beat Charles Oliveira to win the belt, and he beat Dustin Poirier last June at UFC 302. Again, it's part of the sport. Injuries happen. I get it. Arman couldn't fight. He had back issues. It is what it is. I get it. But when you want to talk about a dominant championship run, I think you have to sit back and you might have to asterisk various portions of it, just because sometimes you're judged based on that. I mean, LeBron James has a losing record in the NBA Finals. Some people hold it against him that he does, other people don't. Islam Makhachev hasn't lost a fight in 10 years. Do you hold it against him that he hasn't done that? Or do you take a look and you say, okay, some of the guys he beat in this title reign really didn't make sense for the time in which they occurred? To me, Renato Moicano, I love him. He's a great dude, or he seems like a great dude. But to fight the number 10 guy in the world just to save the main event, in my humble opinion, didn't make sense. In my humble opinion as well, I think Dana White's comments regarding Arman Tarzukian being next in line for a shot at the UFC lightweight title, or not being next in line for it, is unfair. That's a rematch we've waited 5 years to see. It's a great fight. I think a back injury the day before the fight, I think, is a little bit. I could understand both arguments, because then there's the other argument: oh, Zain, why didn't he notify the UFC sooner? I think there are a lot of factors, and I don't want to speculate as to why he didn't or he did. But I will say this: if you're a world class athlete fighting for a championship and you're injured and you know that you might only have one chance to earn a title shot, aren't you going to do everything in your power to make sure that you do your best to make the fight? Which is exactly what he did until literally the 11th hour, when he knew he couldn't fight. I mean, there's not much more to say other than you got to give Arman Tarzukian credit, because could you even remotely imagine? Could you imagine if, you know 2 months ago the fight was off, or a month ago the fight was off? Then you got to rebook the whole fight again. They're going to do it anyway. But could you imagine how much different the narrative would be around this? That's kind of the point that I'm making. Is I think what MMA fans are failing to realize, with this main event in particular is that Arman, to me, doesn't owe the UFC what they think he does. Okay, he's done what he needs to do. His resume speaks for itself. I don't understand why you can't just rebook the fight. He's the clear number one contender in the division. Who else are you going to give him that makes logical sense? Arman Tarzukian already beat Charles Oliveira. So you mean to tell me that Charles Oliveira, who's already lost to Arman Tarzukian, is going to get rewarded for being 1-1 in his last two fights when Arman Tarzukian is on a winning streak of his own? Just something to think about. If you go off based off merit, what the UFC is doing by not awarding him another shot at the title, to me is wrong. When you look at it from a rankings perspective, from a business perspective, I totally get it because they feel like they were inconvenienced by his injury. But then again, you can't control when guys get hurt, whatever the case is. I could be rambling here a little bit, but I just felt very uneasy about Moicano taking this fight. Thank goodness it wasn't Dariush, because that would have made it worse. Dariush has lost two in a row. That would have not made sense. But at the end of the day, we got the main event. Islam Makhachev, still the UFC lightweight champion of the world. And of course, in the co-main event, Murav Dvalishvili earning a decision win against Umar Nurmagomedov, handing Umar Nurmagomedov his first loss. So just something to keep in mind there. Overall, on UFC this past week, I went 8-5. And because I haven't been on this show this year yet, I'm happy to share that I am 3 fights above 500 through 2 UFC events at 15-12. So just something we're going to continue to monitor as we move forward. But that's my little UFC capsule. But before we're done, we have to get into Zain Zinger here because I have a bold take. And that bold take is this. I think the UFC should go to Amazon, and I think it's a no-brainer. There are a couple reasons. I understand Netflix is in bed with TKO when it comes to the WWE. I get it. But I feel like the UFC should be different. And here's why. Amazon already has the NFL. The NBA, I think, is on its way, from what I understand. Let me just take a look. I want to make sure I get this right. Okay, let's see here. Amazon, that begins in 2026 for 11 years as of July of last year. Okay, so that's great. The NFL already has a deal with Amazon for Thursday night, for Black Friday, and for one NFL playoff game in the opening round of the playoffs. That's a slam dunk right there. And they also have PBC boxing events, which PBC is trying to reverse its course and come back from whatever hiatus they've been in. Good for them. But overall, though, I just think the UFC going to Amazon makes sense. And let's talk about this from a consumer standpoint. Again, for what feels like the thousandth time, I was scrolling through Twitter the night of the fight, and of course I saw tons of people say that they couldn't order the fight on ESPN Plus in the United States. How many times do I have to say on this show that it is unacceptable in 2025 when you are a sports consumer as a regular human being that you can't purchase a pay-per-view sporting event? How many times do I have to say this? On TV, back in the day, it was never an issue. The only time it was ever an issue was when the cable provider's signal would go out nationwide and you couldn't do anything about it until it came back. Now with streaming, there should be no issues whatsoever. I have no issues streaming Thursday Night Football. I have no issues streaming Black Friday. I had no issues streaming the Steelers Ravens game on Wild Card Weekend. You mean to tell me that ESPN, the conglomerate of sports media, can't figure out their pay-per-view streaming model? Yet it had the national championship game in 4K between Ohio State and Notre Dame Monday night with no issues whatsoever on any of the major platforms. I think I saw YouTube TV had a brief issue, but it might have been fixed before the game ended. I don't know. I don't have YouTube TV anymore, but I can tell you that the direct TV feed was perfect because I watched a portion of the game not only on Playback but also on my direct TV, and it was phenomenal. I had no issues whatsoever. So you mean to tell me that ESPN Plus is currently and still having issues with pay per view during the final year of its UFC TV deal, which is worth I'm just gonna admit it, a boatload of money, money that is incomprehensible to the average person. You mean to tell me that in 2025 of all years, when technology is at the forefront of everything that consumers do and everything that we strive to do as just regular ordinary people, specifically in America, you mean to tell me that streaming is still a prevalent issue? I think your answer is right there. There's tons of people that are dissatisfied with their ESPN Plus experience. Take the misery out of it. Leave ESPN. It's clear that if ESPN doesn't want to fix it, it's obvious. If ESPN had fixed it, people would know by now. But people are so fixated on making sure that everything is perfect that ESPN is yet to fix it for certain people because people tweet about it all the time. And ESPN gives the same bullcrap answer every single time. There's a guy, I'm not going to say who he is because I don't remember who he is, but there's a guy who says he gets logged out of ESPN Plus once a week and he doesn't even do anything. Really? A service logs you out for no reason, even when you don't have the app open? I'm sorry. What does that do to serve the customer? I seriously don't understand where ESPN's angle is on this. As I alluded to, Amazon should be the front runner. They have some of the biggest major sports at the moment. The UFC should take advantage of it, capitalize. They don't have enough pay for TV content that isn't TV shows, so they should add more live sports to the mix. It's as simple as that. I would be all on board if that occurred. All right. Um, excuse me for just 1 second. I have to pause it. Just a second. All right, now we're going to get into the NFC AFC Championship game previews. So, looking at this now, we've got the NFC Championship. It is a surprise one. Philadelphia versus Washington. Washington upset the Detroit Lions this past Sunday, advancing to the championship game. And the Eagles, after winning the NFC East, knocked off Green Bay in the wild card round, and then of course defeated the Rams in a in a snowbank type game last week to reach the NFC Championship. It's a great quarterback matchup. Jalen Hurts versus Jaden Daniels should be one of the best NFC championships in recent memory. My early pick on this game is the Eagles. I don't think they're going to cover the spread though. I think the Commanders are too good. I think they'll keep it close. And but I do think the Eagles are just overall a little bit more fundamentally sound. Washington is a great story. Jaden Daniels is a really bright future, and he was the number 2 overall pick, and has done some really good things for the Commanders. They have a really, really exciting team ahead and whatever, but the Cinderella run ends here, and I think Philly gets it done. On the AFC side, I love Kansas City. They're at home. Kansas City's been the Bills' kryptonite for years now. They really can't seem to get over the hump. They got to get to the Super Bowl at some point. But I think Kansas City has improved enough to where Mahomes is going to outduel Josh Allen, cover whatever the spread ends up being by kick, and go to the Super Bowl and play Philadelphia. Rematch of the one in Arizona from 2 years ago, which is the one I went to. I covered that as a Northwestern Medill student, and I think we're going to get the rematch, and I think the Chiefs are going to three-peat. That's my early Super Bowl pick. All right, we're going to wrap up the show with 2 other things. We're going to do a what we missed in sports. So, for those of you who can't tell, for those of you who follow the show as closely as you might, we have been off for quite a bit. We've been off now for about a month, so I just figured I would tell you guys what I've been up to. sports wise in regards to what is relevant to this show. So I guess we'll talk about it. So for those of you who don't know, Bando's Blitz is still continuing. We're doing really well with that. It comes out once a week, and it seems like people are really enjoying my picks. So shout out to all of you that tune in on a weekly basis. Shout out to all of the private DMs I've received about the segment. We're going to keep that going. We're going to keep it going into 2025 and beyond. So I'm excited about that. I also wanted to let you guys know that I was in Orlando. I got to cover the Citrus Bowl. I got to watch Illinois clinch its 10th win of the year against South Carolina, cap off a great season. I went to 6 Illinois football games this past year. I covered 4 of them, and we went 3-1 in the games that I covered, which is very exciting. The only loss was against Minnesota, which in Illinois won that game. They probably would have made it as one of as a 2-loss college football playoff team. I think was very much a possibility. So that was a very exciting experience just to cover another major bowl game. That's my second bowl game in a 3-year stretch that I've covered. Again, the other one was Illinois, Mississippi State. That was Brett's first bowl game when he was as Illinois' coach. So very exciting stuff. What else? So yeah, there was Orlando. We did some stuff with Bando's Blitz, as I alluded to. We had the end of the NFL season, and of course, I've just been covering a ton of college football. Elsewhere, it's been a really fun journey. Sad that college football is over. But overall, I really could not be happier with everything that I'm currently doing, and I think what we missed in sports is kind of a lot. So let me just run through a few quick things because I have to credit myself for some of these accomplishments because they're pretty remarkable. So I do Yahoo Pick'em every year from the NFL, and we finished the season straight up with an insane record. My final record for the NFL season was 195-77 overall. It's the best NFL record I've ever had. No doubt about it. It's one that I'm really, really proud of, and it's one that I think I will carry forward with me for years to come. I don't know if I'll be able to duplicate a record like this ever again, but I'm very, very proud of my efforts picking a lot of games correctly on a weekly basis. We ended week 18 with a 9-7 record. Now that the bowl season is officially over, I can happily report that bowl season wise, we actually did pretty well too. Let me get into what that was all about with Capital One Bowl Mania. And I do this every year. This is through ESPN. And we won two of the groups I was in, which is very exciting. They were both Big Ten based. We finished 32-15 on bowl picks, straight up, and we finished 26-21 against the spread. We did really, really well. Let's take a look at some of the places I came in a 38 person pool. I came in tied for first at 32-15, which is very impressive. Let's take a look at some of the other placements I had. A general Illinois fan group that I was in. I came in 10th place. In another college football group I was in, I came in 20th. In Sports Center, I came in the top 1,700. In College Game Day, I came in the top 1,500. And of course, in the Northwestern fans of, I came in tied for first. So we did really, really well. And by the way, the fans of Northwestern pool, that was out of 19 people. And we both tied. Purple Pros is the one who won that. And we both tied with 32-15 records. So overall, we did really well in the college football front. As for my fantasy football team, which is named after my Bando's Blitz segment, Bando's Blitz went deep into the playoffs. We lost in the championship game, and we finished in second. So we were able to take home some prize money there. Shout out to Game Day Media and all those guys for running a very, very fun fantasy football season. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not let you guys know how my UFC 2024 picks record finished out. I never got a chance to tell you guys this. I was pretty proud of it overall, but let me just take a look so I don't get my numbers construed here. I want to make sure that I give you guys the most accurate number possible. So let's take a look here. Um, my overall UFC record without Dana White Contender Series was 287, 226, and 4. My record with Dana White Contender Series was a little bit better as I went 29 and 20 on that show to finish 316, 246, and 4 with a UFC pay-per-view main event record of 8 and 5. I went 500 overall on UFC main events of 21 and 21. So did pretty well on UFC for the most part, just above 500. First year ever tracking predictions. Was pretty proud of it. Picking fights is one of the most difficult things you can do as someone in sports media. Not just sports media alone, but just being a UFC fan. If you are someone that is just strictly a fan and tracks picks for fun, it's one of the hardest things you can do. But Tapology is your friend for that sort of thing. And speaking of Tapology, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's basically MMA's version of Pro Football Reference. You can look up anything that's noteworthy regarding MMA, fighter records, stats, all that stuff is there. Let's take a look at how I did in 2024. So overall, in 2024, combining all the promotions I picked out of, 735, 498, and 10 was my final record in 2024. That was good enough for nearly a 60% clip. And so far, we are just above 50% on predictions in MMA for the year. So a lot to be excited about from that front. And that is what we missed in sports. So just to wrap up the show, Zain's look ahead, what we're looking forward to. After this week, we have 10 straight weeks of UFC events. So stay tuned for all the previews of those. There's no UFC event this weekend, but you'll still get a Bando's Blitz from me with some other news items and other bits and so much more. We did not have any errors this week, which means we have officially wrapped up the first episode of 2025. Thank you very much for tuning in. It is greatly appreciated. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support that you guys have given me throughout the show. Just a quick reminder, though, to please be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever your podcast. Again, that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. And just as a final reminder, Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And again, I hope to see you guys more often in 2025. This has been another edition of and was breakdowns with myself, Zain Bando, courtesy of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, and we will see you guys soon. Have a good one.